The locket felt like a lead weight in Delilah Preston's palm as she stood before the wagon master, her entire life reduced to this single piece of gold that had belonged to her mother. It was spring of 1876, and Independence, Missouri teemed with folks heading west, all of them chasing dreams while she was running from a nightmare. Her cotton dress hung loose on her frame after weeks of rationing food, and the dark circles under her green eyes told the story of sleepless nights spent hiding from the man who claimed he owned her late father's debts. The wagon master, a gruff fellow named Henderson, examined the locket with calculating eyes, turning it over to study the delicate engraving of roses on its surface. "This'll get you to California," Henderson said finally, his tobacco-stained teeth showing through his beard. "But just barely. You'll work for your keep, help the women with cooking and mending. We leave at dawn." Delilah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat as she watched him pocket the last piece of her mother she had left. The locket had survived everything. Her mother's death from fever 3 years ago, her father's passing just 6 months past, the creditors who had taken their small farm in Ohio. Now it was gone, traded for the slim hope of a new start in the West. That night, she slept fitfully under a borrowed blanket near the gathering of wagons, clutching her small cloth bag that contained one spare dress, her mother's Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. The sounds of the camp surrounded her, families laughing and talking, children playing, the comfortable noise of people who belonged somewhere. She had never felt more alone. Dawn broke cold and pink across the Missouri sky. Delilah joined the train of 17 wagons, walking alongside the Hutchinson family's rig as promised. Mrs. Hutchinson was a practical woman with 4 children under 10, who seemed grateful for the extra hands, even if those hands were as inexperienced as Delilah's. The first days on the trail were harder than anything Delilah had imagined. Her feet blistered inside her worn boots, her back ached from bending over campfires, and the dust seemed to coat everything, including the inside of her lungs. They followed the trail west through Kansas, the flat grasslands stretching endlessly in every direction. Delilah learned to make coffee strong enough to strip paint, to knead dough in a wooden bowl balanced on her knees, to keep the Hutchinson children from wandering too close to the wagon wheels. She learned the rhythm of trail life. Wake before dawn, walk until the sun climbed high, rest briefly, then walk until dark painted the sky purple and orange. Every night she fell into exhausted sleep, too tired even to dream. It was 3 weeks into the journey, somewhere in the Nebraska territory, when Delilah first saw Vincent Garrett. The wagon train had stopped early due to a broken wheel on one of the rigs, and Henderson had sent word they needed a wheelwright or anyone skilled with repairs. That was when Vincent rode into camp on a paint horse, leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. He was tall, probably mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He wore typical cowboy gear, worn denim pants, a blue shirt faded from sun and washing, a leather vest, and a hat that had seen better days. A gun belt hung at his hips, but it was the carpenter's tools strapped to his saddle that had Henderson waving him over. "Heard you folks might need some help," Vincent said, swinging down from his horse with easy grace. His voice was low and warm, with an accent that suggested Texas or maybe further south. "Wheels cracked clean through," Henderson said. "You know anything about fixing such things?" Vincent walked over to examine the damaged wheel, running his hands over the splintered wood with surprising gentleness. Delilah watched from where she was helping Mrs. Hutchinson prepare the evening meal, her hands busy cutting salt pork, but her attention captured by the stranger. There was something about the careful way he examined the wheel, the thoughtful expression on his sun-bronzed face, that spoke of competence and patience. "I can fix it," Vincent said after a moment, "but it will take most of tomorrow. The wood needs proper shaping, and I'll need to heat and reset the iron rim." Henderson looked relieved. "We'll pay you fair." "Just need some supplies and a hot meal," Vincent replied, already unloading tools from his mule. "Been on the trail from Colorado, heading to California myself." Company would be welcome for a spell. That evening, Vincent joined the communal dinner, and Delilah found herself acutely aware of where he sat across the fire. He was quiet, speaking only when spoken to, but his eyes were observant. She caught him looking at her once, and the intensity of his gaze made her cheeks flush as she quickly looked away. She told herself she was being foolish. A man like that probably had a girl waiting for him somewhere, or at least a string of them in various towns. The next day, Delilah had to walk past where Vincent was working on the wheel several times while fetching water and gathering buffalo chips for fuel. Each time, she tried not to stare at the way his muscles moved under his shirt as he worked, or the concentration on his face as he shaped the new wooden spoke. "You can come closer if you want to watch," he said suddenly, not looking up from his work. "I do not bite." Delilah froze, mortified at being caught. "I was not watching, I was just passing by." Now he did look up, and there was something like amusement in his amber eyes. "My apologies, then, must have been mistaken." She should have walked away. Instead, she found herself setting down the water buckets and moving closer. "How did you learn to do this kind of work?" "My father was a carpenter back in Texas," Vincent said, returning his attention to the wheel. "He taught me to work with wood before I could barely walk." Said a man who could build and fix things would never want for work. He paused, using a draw knife to shave the spoke into shape. He was right about that much. "Is he still in Texas?" "No," Vincent's voice went flat. "He and my mother died of cholera when I was 17. Lost my younger sister too. That was 8 years back." "I am sorry," Delilah said quietly, recognizing the weight of that kind of loss. "I lost both my parents too. My mother to fever, my father just this past winter." Vincent looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt seen in a way she had not experienced in a long time. "Is that why you are heading west?" "To outrun the grief, to outrun the debts," she corrected, then bit her lip, wondering why she was telling this stranger her troubles. "My father owed money when he died. The man he owed it to decided I should work it off, but not in any respectable way." She hugged her arms around herself. "So I ran. Traded my mother's locket for passage west, figured I could start over somewhere new." Vincent set down his tools, his expression serious. "That took courage, or desperation," Delilah said with a brittle laugh. "I am not certain there is much difference." "There is," Vincent said firmly. "Desperation makes people reckless. Courage makes them survive." He picked up his tools again, but his voice was gentler when he spoke. "You are going to be all right, Miss Preston, Delilah Preston, Vincent Garrett," he said, meeting her eyes again. "And I mean it, Miss Preston. You are going to be just fine." Something about the way he said it, like a promise or a prophecy, made her want to believe him. She stayed and watched him work for another hour, and they talked about small things. The weather, the trail, the vast sky overhead. It was the most peaceful Delilah had felt since before her father died. That evening, Henderson announced that Vincent would be traveling with the wagon train for a while, at least until they reached Fort Laramie. Some of the women looked pleased at having another able-bodied man along, especially one as handy with repairs as Vincent had proven to be. Delilah told herself the flutter in her chest was just relief at the added protection, nothing more. But over the following days, as the wagon train crawled across the Nebraska plains, she found herself increasingly aware of Vincent's presence. He rode scout sometimes, checking the trail ahead, but often he walked alongside the wagons, helping where needed. He fixed a broken axle for the Patterson family, adjusted harnesses for the Hutchinsons, and built a better jig for hanging cookpots over the fire. His hands were never idle. He also, Delilah noticed, seemed to find reasons to be near wherever she was working. He would bring fresh water when she was washing clothes in the creek. He would gather extra firewood and stack it near the Hutchinson wagon. Once, when her worn boots finally gave up entirely, splitting along the seam, he sat down that evening and stitched them back together with leather cord and patient fingers. "You do not have to do that," Delilah protested, embarrassed by the charity. "I know," Vincent said, not looking up from his careful stitching, "but those boots are not going to last you to California if somebody does not fix them properly. I could have done it myself." "Could you?" He glanced up, one eyebrow raised. "Have you ever stitched leather before?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, forced to admit, "No." "Then let me help." His voice was gentle but firm. "There is no shame in accepting help when it is freely offered, Delilah." It was the first time he had used her given name without the formal Miss Preston, and the sound of it in his low drawl did strange things to her heartbeat. She sat down on the log beside him, watching his strong hands work the leather. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked quietly. Vincent was silent for a long moment, focusing on pushing the thick needle through the leather. Finally, he said, "When my family died, I had nothing. No money, no prospects, nowhere to go. An old rancher named Samuel took me in, taught me about horses and cattle, gave me work when I was too grief-stricken to even think straight. He did not have to do that. I was just some kid who wandered onto his land looking for work." He tied off the thread and started on the other boot. "He told me once that kindness was not about what people deserved, it was about what kind of person you wanted to be. I have tried to remember that." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "That is a good way to live. Samuel was a good man. Died 2 years back, left me enough money to buy some land if I could find the right place." He finished the second boot and held them both out to her. "That is why I am heading to California, looking for that right place." Their fingers brushed as she took the boots, and the contact sent warmth shooting up her arm. "Thank you, Vincent. You are welcome." He stood, dusting off his pants. "Get some rest, Delilah. We have a long walk tomorrow." As the days rolled into weeks, Delilah found herself falling into an easy rhythm with Vincent. They would walk together during the day sometimes, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to break horses and read the weather. She told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her mother's garden and her father's stories. The conversations felt natural, comfortable, like slipping into a warm bath after a cold day. But there was also an undercurrent of something else, something that made her pulse quicken when their hands accidentally touched, that made her hyper-aware of his presence. She would catch him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and wondering that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced. One evening, after they had crossed into Wyoming territory, a group of young men from the wagon train started a campfire away from the main group, playing fiddle music and dancing. Delilah was washing dishes when Vincent appeared beside her, his hat in his hands. "Would you like to dance?" he asked, and there was something almost nervous in his voice that she had not heard before. Delilah looked down at her wet hands, her worn dress, the state of her wind-blown hair. "I am not exactly dressed for dancing." "Neither am I," Vincent pointed out. "But I do not think anyone much cares out here." She dried her hands on her apron, her heart hammering. "I am not very good at dancing. Then we will be terrible together." He offered his hand and she took it, letting him lead her toward the firelight. The fiddle player was sawing out a lively tune, and several couples were already spinning around the fire. Vincent put one hand on her waist, kept the other clasping her hand, and began to move. He was right, neither of them were particularly skilled, but there was joy in the movement, in the closeness, in the way he smiled down at her as they turned. "See," Vincent said. "Not so bad. We nearly crashed into the Johnsons," Delilah pointed out, but she was laughing. "Nearly only counts with horseshoes and hand grenades," he replied, spinning her out and then back in close. This time, she ended up closer than before, her free hand resting on his chest where she could feel the solid beat of his heart through his shirt. The fiddle player switched to a slower tune, and the tempo changed. Vincent adjusted his hold, bringing her closer still, and they swayed more than danced. Delilah was intensely aware of every point of contact between them, his hand warm on her waist, her palm cradled in his, the scant inches between their bodies. She could smell leather and wood smoke and something distinctly him. "Delilah," Vincent said, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the music. "Yes, I should tell you something." He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "When I said I was heading to California to find land, that was true. But it is getting harder to remember why that mattered so much." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his amber eyes intense on hers, "that every day I find another reason why staying near you seems more important than any piece of land in California." Before she could respond, before she could process the rush of feeling his words evoked, a shout went up from the edge of camp. The music stopped abruptly. Vincent immediately stepped back, his hand going to his gun, his entire body tensed and alert. Henderson came running toward the fire. "Everyone back to your wagons. We have got riders coming in and they do not look friendly." The camp erupted into controlled chaos. Women grabbed children, men reached for rifles, and the festive atmosphere evaporated like morning dew. Vincent kept himself between Delilah and the direction of the threat as they hurried toward the Hutchinson wagon. "Get inside," he told her, his voice commanding in a way she had not heard before. "What about you?" "I will be fine. Just stay down and stay safe." The riders turned out to be a rough group of men, 8 of them, not quite outlaws but not respectable either. They rode into camp bold as brass, demanding supplies and whiskey. Henderson negotiated with their leader, a scarred man who kept his hand on his pistol the whole time. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Delilah peered out from the wagon, her heart in her throat as she watched Vincent standing with the other men, rifle in hand, face impassive. The negotiation seemed to take forever, but finally Henderson handed over some supplies and a bottle of whiskey, and the rough riders left, whooping and firing their guns in the air as they galloped off. The camp slowly relaxed, though the men kept watch all night. Vincent stayed near the Hutchinson wagon, pacing a slow circuit, and every time Delilah looked out, he was there, solid and watchful. It made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father was alive. In the morning, the wagon train packed up quickly, everyone eager to put distance between themselves and the previous night's visitors. As they walked that day, Vincent stayed close to Delilah, and she noticed he was more alert, scanning their surroundings constantly. "Do you think they will come back?" she asked. "No," Vincent said. "Men like that are bullies and cowards. They only push when they think they can get away with it. Henderson gave them enough to make it not worth the trouble of a fight." He glanced at her. "But I am staying close just the same." "I am glad," she admitted. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "About what you said last night before we were interrupted." Vincent slowed his pace, creating a small bubble of privacy as the wagons creaked along. "I meant it, Delilah. every word. "I do not have anything to offer," she said, needing him to understand. "No land, no money, no prospects. I traded away the last thing of value I owned just to get on this wagon train." "You think that matters to me?" Vincent stopped walking entirely, gently catching her arm so she would face him. "I have been alone for 8 years, Delilah. I have had money and work and more offers of land than I knew what to do with. But I have not had this. I have not had someone to talk to who really listens, someone who understands what it is like to lose everything and keep going anyway. I have not had someone whose smile makes the whole damn prairie look brighter." She stared at him, overwhelmed by the raw honesty in his voice. "Vincent, You do not have to say anything right now," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that whatever happens, wherever we end up, I would like to be there with you. If you will have me." Delilah felt like her heart might burst right out of her chest. Here was this good man, this capable, kind, honest man, offering her everything she had thought she lost when she traded away her mother's locket. Not just passage west, but a reason to stop running. A reason to build instead of just survive. "Yes," she whispered. "I would like that very much." The smile that broke across Vincent's face was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers, and they walked that way for the rest of the day, hands joined, the future suddenly looking brighter than Delilah had dared to imagine. But the trail west was never easy for long. A week later, they reached Fort Laramie in Wyoming Territory, a bustling way station where wagon trains could resupply and rest. It was there that everything fell apart. Delilah was at the fort's small general store, helping Mrs. Hutchinson select supplies, when she heard a voice that turned her blood to ice. Well, if it is not Miss Preston, alive and well. She turned slowly to find Marcus Thornton standing in the doorway, his thin lips curved in a smile that did not reach his cold blue eyes. He was the creditor her father had owed, the man she had fled from in Independence. Seeing him here, hundreds of miles from Missouri, made her knees go weak. "You led me on quite a chase, my dear," Marcus said, moving into the store with casual confidence. He was dressed well, as always, his dark suit immaculate despite the dusty surroundings. "But I am a patient man, and I always collect what is owed to me." "I do not owe you anything," Delilah said, forcing steel into her voice despite her shaking hands. "My father's debts died with him." "Now that is not quite true, and you know it." Marcus examined some canned goods with feigned interest. "Your father signed a contract. When he defaulted, his property became mine. That includes you. I am not property. The law might disagree, depending on how one reads the contract." He set down the can and looked at her directly. "But I am willing to be reasonable. Come back with me, work off the debt as we discussed, and I will forget about this little incident of you running away." "No." Delilah lifted her chin, even as fear clawed at her throat. "I am not going anywhere with you." Marcus's expression hardened. "Then I will have the law compel you. The fort commander is an old friend. I am sure he will be happy to help me recover my stolen property." He turned and walked out, leaving Delilah shaking so hard she had to grip the counter for support. Mrs. Hutchinson put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What was that about, dear?" "Trouble," Delilah managed. "I need to find Vincent." She found him near the stables, checking over his horse. The moment he saw her face, he was moving toward her, concern written in every line of his body. "What happened?" She told him everything, the words tumbling out. Her father's gambling debts, Marcus Thornton's contract, the way he had suggested she could pay off what was owed by becoming his mistress in all but name. How she had run instead, desperate and terrified. Vincent's face went hard as stone as he listened. "He cannot make you go with him," Vincent said firmly. That contract is not legal no matter what he claims. But what if the fort commander takes his side? What if they force me back? Vincent took her shoulders gently, making her look at him. Listen to me, I will not let that happen. Do you understand? I will not let him take you. But what can you do? He has money and connections, and I have something he does not, Vincent interrupted. I have you, and I have a reason to fight. That makes me a lot more dangerous than he realizes. Delilah wanted to believe him, but fear had its claws in her deep. Maybe I should just leave, slip away tonight before he can involve the authorities. No, Vincent's voice was firm. No more running, Delilah. We face this together, and we end it here. That evening, Marcus Thornton came to the wagon train's camp with the fort commander, a weathered man named Captain Stevens. Henderson was summoned, and Vincent stayed close to Delilah as Marcus laid out his case, showing papers he claimed proved his right to take Delilah back to Missouri. Captain Stevens examined the documents, his expression neutral. These papers say the debt transfers to next of kin. That would be Miss Preston. The debt was not valid to begin with, Vincent interjected. Preston's father signed under duress and false pretenses. No legitimate court would uphold it. Marcus smiled coldly. And are you a lawyer, Mr. Garrett? No, but I know right from wrong. Vincent stepped forward, placing himself between Marcus and Delilah. And I know that what you are trying to do is wrong, no matter what those papers say. The law is the law, Marcus said smoothly. Captain, I trust you will do your duty. Captain Stevens looked between them all, then focused on Delilah. Miss Preston, what do you have to say about all this? Delilah stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. I say that my father was a good man who made a bad mistake. When he died, I had nothing. Mr. Thornton offered me a way to pay the debt, but not through honest work. He wanted me to be his kept woman. I ran rather than accept that. She met the captain's eyes steadily. I would rather die than go back with him. Captain Stevens was quiet for a long moment. Then he rolled up the papers and handed them back to Marcus. These papers might hold weight in Missouri, but we are in Wyoming territory now. And I do not see anything here that gives you legal right to force a woman to return with you against her will, especially for the purposes you have suggested. Marcus's face darkened. Captain, surely you can see what I see, the captain interrupted, his voice taking on an edge of command. Is a man trying to use legal maneuvering to accomplish something that is morally reprehensible. The debt you are claiming is dubious at best, and even if it were legitimate, you cannot force a person into servitude to repay it. Not anymore. So I suggest you get back on your horse and head back to Missouri, because you have no authority here. Marcus looked furious, but he was smart enough to know when he was beaten. This is not over, he said, looking at Delilah. I will find another way to collect what is mine. If you come near her again, Vincent said, his voice deadly quiet, we are going to have a very different kind of conversation. One I do not think you will enjoy. The threat was clear enough that Marcus took a step back. He looked at Vincent, measuring him, and whatever he saw made him decide the fight was not worth it. Keep her then, he said with a dismissive wave. She was probably more trouble than she was worth anyway. He stormed off into the darkness. Captain Stevens tipped his hat to Delilah. You should be safe now, miss. Men like that are usually cowards when their legal tricks do not work. After the captain left, Delilah felt like her legs might give out. Vincent caught her, supporting her weight as the adrenaline drained away. It is over, he murmured. You are safe now. She clung to him, shaking with relief and residual fear. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for standing up for me. Always, Vincent said, his arms tightening around her. I will always stand up for you. They stood there under the Wyoming stars, holding each other, and Delilah felt something shift inside her. She had been alone for so long, fighting her battles by herself, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone truly on her side. Vincent was offering her that, not because he wanted something from her, but because he cared. Because somewhere along the dusty trail west, amid campfires and wagon wheels and endless prairie, they had fallen in love. The wagon train stayed at Fort Laramie for 3 days, resting and resupplying. During that time, Vincent and Delilah spent every possible moment together. They walked along the river, sat under cottonwood trees, and talked about their dreams for the future. Vincent told her about the kind of ranch he wanted to build, with good grazing land and clear water. Delilah told him about wanting a garden like her mother's had been, and maybe chickens, and a kitchen with windows that let in morning light. "That sounds perfect," Vincent said, lying in the grass beside her, their shoulders touching as they watched clouds drift across the impossibly blue sky. "It sounds like a dream," Delilah said. "I am afraid to believe in it too much." Vincent rolled onto his side, propping his head on his hand so he could look at her. "Why?" "Because I have lost everything I ever dared to love," she said quietly. "My mother, my father, our home, my mother's locket. What if I let myself love this dream, love you, and then that gets taken away too?" "What if it does not?" Vincent countered. "What if this time you get to keep what you love? What if we build that ranch and plant that garden and spend 50 years arguing about whether to get chickens or goats?" "Chickens," Delilah said, and they both laughed. Then she sobered, reaching out to trace the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I am afraid, Vincent, but I think I want to try anyway." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips to kiss her palm. "Then that is all I ask. Just try, Delilah." "Try with me." "All right," she whispered. "I will try." On their last evening at Fort Laramie, Vincent asked her to take a walk with him away from the camp. They followed the river until the sounds of the fort faded behind them, replaced by the rushing of water over rocks and the evening songs of birds. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, turning the landscape into something from a dream. Vincent stopped at a bend in the river where wildflowers grew in colorful profusion along the bank. He turned to face her, and in the golden light he looked almost unreal, too good to be true. "Delilah Preston," he said, taking both her hands in his. "I know we have not known each other long. Less than 2 months by my count. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of this. I love you. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you keep going even when everything seems impossible. I love talking to you and walking with you and just being near you. And I do not want to spend another day wondering about the future without knowing you are going to be in it." He released one of her hands to reach into his vest pocket, pulling out something wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, Delilah gasped. It was her mother's locket, the one she had traded to Henderson for passage west. "How did you?" she started, but her throat closed up with tears. "I bought it from Henderson a few days after I joined the wagon train," Vincent said. "I was going to give it to you eventually, but I wanted to wait for the right moment." He opened the locket, showing her mother's tiny portrait inside, then tucked something new beside it, a small photograph of himself. "Marry me, Delilah. Marry me and come to California with me. Not as someone just traveling alongside, but as my wife, my partner in everything. Help me build that ranch and plant that garden and argue about chickens. Say yes, and I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy." Delilah looked at the locket, at her mother's face and Vincent's side by side, and it felt like a blessing. Like her mother was giving her permission to move forward, to love again, to believe in a future that included happiness. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you." He let out a breath like he had been holding it for years. then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a sweetness and passion that made her forget the river, the sunset, everything except the feeling of being held by him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he clasped the locket around her neck where it belonged. "I love you," Delilah said, the words feeling right and true. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Vincent replied, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "We are going to be so happy, Delilah. I promise you that." They were married the next morning by the fort chaplain, with Henderson and Mrs. Hutchinson standing as witnesses. Delilah wore her best dress, which was still worn and faded, but Vincent looked at her like she was wearing silk and diamonds. They said their vows in the small fort chapel, promising to love and honor each other through whatever came. And when the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her like she was precious and breakable and strong all at once. The wagon train celebrated their marriage that night with music and dancing, and what passed for wedding cake on the trail. Henderson even produced a bottle of actual whiskey he had been saving, and toasts were made to the bride and groom. Delilah danced with her new husband under the stars, her mother's locket warm against her skin, and felt happier than she could remember being in years. "Mrs. Garrett," Vincent said as they swayed to fiddle music. "That sounds good." "It does," Delilah agreed, resting her head against his chest to hear his heartbeat. "It sounds like home." They made camp that night a little apart from the others, giving them some privacy for their wedding night. Vincent had borrowed a tent from one of the other families, setting it up carefully and spreading blankets inside to make it comfortable. Delilah stood outside it, suddenly nervous, and Vincent seemed to sense her hesitation. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said gently, taking her hands. "I am happy just to hold you tonight, Delilah. We have the rest of our lives for everything else." His understanding eased her nerves. "I want to," she said. "I am just a little scared. I have never been with anyone before." "Neither have I," Vincent admitted, and her surprise must have shown because he smiled ruefully. "I have been waiting for the right person. Turns out you were worth the wait." He led her into the tent and they made love slowly, carefully, learning each other in the soft darkness. Vincent was gentle and patient, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted every touch, every kiss. And when they finally came together, it felt right and natural and like the final piece of something important clicking into place. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the blankets, Delilah's head on Vincent's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. "That was perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect," Vincent replied, kissing the top of her head, "and I am the luckiest man alive." "We are both lucky," Delilah said, snuggling closer. "We found each other when we both needed it most." The wagon train continued west, but now Delilah rode beside her husband instead of walking alone. Vincent had bought her a gentle mare at Fort Laramie, and they rode together, talking and laughing and planning their future. The journey was still hard, the days still long and dusty, but Delilah found joy in it now. She was not running anymore. She was moving towards something, building something with a man she loved at her side. They crossed into Utah territory as summer blazed hot and bright. The landscape changed, becoming more dramatic with red rock formations and deep canyons. They followed the trail through Salt Lake City, where they restocked supplies and marveled at the organized community the Mormon settlers had built. Then they pushed on, following the Humboldt River through Nevada, the land growing drier and more challenging. It was hard going through Nevada. Water was scarce, the heat was oppressive, and tempers grew short. But Vincent and Delilah supported each other through it, finding reasons to smile even on the worst days. When her mare went lame and they had to walk again for several days, Vincent walked beside her, telling stories to distract her from the pain in her feet. When he came down with a fever from bad water, she sat up through the night, bathing his face with cool cloths and praying he would recover. He did, after 3 terrible days, and the first thing he said when his fever broke was her name. By late summer, they crossed into California. The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed before them, beautiful and daunting. The wagon train tackled the passes slowly, carefully, all of them aware of the Donner Party tragedy that had occurred just 30 years before. But they made it through safely, and when they descended the western slope into the Sacramento Valley, Delilah felt like they had entered another world. Everything was green and lush, such a contrast to the desert they had crossed. Rivers ran clear and full. Oak trees provided shade, and wildflowers carpeted the hills. It was beautiful, more beautiful than Delilah had imagined. Henderson led the wagon train to Sacramento City, where most of the families would settle or disperse to other parts of California. Delilah and Vincent said their goodbyes to the Hutchinsons and the other families they had traveled with, people who had become like family over the months on the trail. "You take care of each other," Mrs. Hutchinson said, hugging Delilah tight. "And you come visit us in Sacramento, you hear?" "We will," Delilah promised, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for everything." Vincent had been asking around and had heard of available land up north in Shasta County near a small town called Redding. It was ranch country with good grazing and plenty of water from the Sacramento River. They set out north with their few possessions: Vincent's horse and Delilah's mare, a pack mule, their camping gear, and the small amount of money Vincent had saved from his years of work. The journey to Redding took another week, but it felt different from the long trail west. They were not part of a wagon train anymore, just the two of them, and there was freedom in that. They could stop when they wanted, take detours to explore, make love under the stars without worrying about being overheard. It was like an extended honeymoon, just them and the open country. Redding, when they reached it, was a small but growing town, serving the ranches and farms scattered throughout the surrounding area. The town sat in a valley with mountains visible in every direction, and the Sacramento River ran through it, providing water for irrigation and power for mills. It was rough and raw, the way frontier towns were, but it had potential. Vincent found a land agent, and they spent several days looking at available properties. Some were too small, others too remote or lacking water. But finally, they found a place that made them both stop and stare. It was 200 acres of rolling grassland with a creek running through it, oak trees providing shade, and a view of the mountains that took Delilah's breath away. There was a small cabin already built, rough but solid, and the remains of corrals that could be repaired. The previous owner had given up and gone back east, but Vincent saw the potential immediately. "This is it," he said, dismounting to walk the land. "This is the place." Delilah walked beside him, looking at the cabin, the creek, the oak trees. She could picture it already. A garden planted near the cabin where the soil looked rich, chickens pecking in the yard, maybe a milk cow grazing by the creek, horses in the repaired corrals, flowers growing wild in the grass, a life built from nothing but built together. "Yes," she agreed. "This is home." They bought the land with Vincent's savings, signing the papers with the land agent in Redding. Delilah Preston Garrett signed her new name for the first time, and the weight of the pen in her hand felt significant. This was real. This was theirs. They owned this land, this future, this chance. The first months were hard work. They lived in the small cabin while Vincent repaired the corrals and started building onto the house. Delilah planted a late-season garden, coaxing vegetables from the soil even as fall approached. They bought a few head of cattle from a neighboring rancher. the beginning of what Vincent hoped would become a proper herd. They acquired chickens, which made Delilah absurdly happy, and a milk cow who she named Bess. The work was endless: fences to mend, hay to cut and store for winter, firewood to chop, food to preserve. But they worked side by side, and every evening when they stopped, exhausted and dirty, they could look around and see what they had accomplished. The ranch was taking shape, slowly but surely. Their nearest neighbors, the Castellano family, welcomed them warmly. Maria Castellano was close to Delilah's age and became a fast friend, teaching her about which crops grew best in the valley and sharing starts from her own garden. Her husband, Eduardo, helped Vincent with the heavier ranch work and gave advice about managing cattle in the area. That first winter was mild by Nebraska or Wyoming standards, but it still got cold, and they were grateful for the fireplace Vincent had improved and the stores of food they had put up. They spent the long evenings planning for spring, talking about what they would plant and build, dreaming out loud about the future. "I want to expand the herd," Vincent said one night as they sat by the fire, Delilah mending a shirt while he worked on repairing a bridle. "Maybe get some horses too. There is good money in training horses. We could build a bigger barn," Delilah suggested. "The one we have now is barely standing." "Next summer," Vincent agreed, "after we get through calving season." Delilah set down her mending, biting her lip. "Vincent, there is something I need to tell you." He looked up immediately, concern in his eyes. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," she said quickly. "At least I do not think so. I am just nervous about how you will feel." He set aside the bridle and moved to sit beside her on the bench, taking her hands. "Delilah, what is it?" "I am pregnant," she said, the words tumbling out. "I have suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be certain before I told you. Maria confirmed it for me today." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face, growing until he was grinning like a fool. "A baby! We are having a baby!" "Yes," Delilah said, relief flooding through her at his reaction. "Sometime in early summer, Maria thinks." Vincent let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating like he could not quite believe it. "Delilah, we are going to be parents." "I know," she said, holding on to him tight. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy," Vincent set her down gently, cupping her face in his hands. "I am beyond happy. This is everything I wanted: a home, a life with you, and now a baby. We are building a family, Delilah." She kissed him, pouring all her love and relief into it. "We are," she agreed. "We are building a family." Winter gave way to spring, and the ranch burst into life. Wildflowers covered the hills, the creek ran full with snowmelt, and the cattle produced healthy calves. Delilah's belly grew round as the season progressed, and Vincent became almost comically protective, insisting she not do any heavy lifting and fussing if she so much as looked tired. "I am pregnant, not dying," Delilah told him after he tried to stop her from weeding the garden. "I know," Vincent said, looking sheepish. "I just worry. I want to make sure you and the baby are all right." His concern was endearing even when it was excessive. And truthfully, Delilah did not mind being taken care of for once. Maria came by often, bringing baby clothes she had saved from her own children and advice about what to expect. The other ranch wives in the area also visited, welcoming Delilah into their community of women who understood the challenges and joys of frontier life. In early June of 1877, almost exactly a year after Delilah had traded her mother's locket for passage west, she went into labor. Maria and another neighbor, Mrs. Chen, attended her while Vincent paced outside the cabin, too nervous to be useful inside. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, but finally, as the sun climbed high, Delilah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Vincent was allowed in to meet his son, and the look on his face when Delilah placed the baby in his arms made her heart swell. He held the infant with such wonder and gentleness, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand, marveling when those small fingers wrapped around his larger one. "He is absolutely perfect, Delilah. What should we name him?" Delilah asked, exhausted but happy, watching her husband fall in love with their son. Vincent thought for a moment. "Samuel," he said finally, "after the man who saved me when I had nothing. Samuel Garrett." "That is perfect," Delilah agreed, reaching out to touch their son's downy hair. "Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the ranch." The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Delilah learned to function on broken sleep, to nurse a hungry infant, to decipher different cries. Vincent helped as much as he could, changing diapers and walking Samuel around the cabin when he was fussy, singing old songs he remembered from his childhood. Despite the exhaustion, Delilah had never been happier. This life they had built, this family they had created, felt like a miracle. When she thought back to that desperate woman who had traded her last possession for passage west, who had nothing and no one, it seemed like a different lifetime. She had everything now. A husband she loved, a son, a home, a future full of promise. As Samuel grew, so did the ranch. Vincent hired help to manage the expanding cattle herd and began training horses as he had planned. Delilah's garden flourished, providing vegetables for their table and extra to sell in town. They added onto the cabin, building a proper bedroom and a nursery, then later a larger kitchen with the windows Delilah had dreamed about. Samuel took his first steps in that kitchen, tottering across the floor into his father's waiting arms. He said his first word, which was hoarse, much to Vincent's delight. He grew into a bright, curious little boy with his father's amber eyes and his mother's dark hair. When Samuel was 2, Delilah became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Catherine, after Vincent's mother. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Vincent was just as smitten, declaring that Catherine was going to be spoiled absolutely rotten. The years rolled on, bringing both challenges and triumphs. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle that got sick and crops that failed. But there were also good years, where everything seemed to go right, where the ranch prospered and grew. Vincent became known in the area as a fair man and a skilled horseman, and Delilah's garden was the talk of the county. They made good friends among their neighbors, and Redding grew from a rough frontier town into a real community with a school, churches, and proper businesses. Samuel and Catherine started attending the school in town, riding there each day on gentle ponies their father had trained. When Samuel was 6 and Catherine was 4, Delilah had one more baby, another boy they named Thomas. Their family felt complete then, the cabin full of noise and laughter and love. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, becoming one of the more successful operations in Shasta County. Vincent and Delilah worked hard, but they also made time for joy. They taught their children to ride, to care for the land and animals, to value honesty and kindness. On Sundays, they would sometimes saddle up and ride as a family to their favorite spot by the creek, where they would picnic, and the children would play while Vincent and Delilah watched, holding hands like they still did after all these years. "Do you ever think about how different life could have been?" Delilah asked one such Sunday, watching Samuel help Catherine skip stones across the creek while baby Thomas napped in her arms. All the time, Vincent admitted, his arm around her shoulders. If I had not heard about that wagon train needing repairs, if I had ridden past instead of stopping, if you had not been brave enough to talk to me that day, if you had not bought my mother's locket from Henderson, Delilah added, touching the necklace she still wore every day. If you had not asked me to marry you by the river, I would have found another way, Vincent said firmly. Somehow, someway, I would have found you, Delilah. I truly believe that. She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of leather and sun and home. I traded everything I had for passage west, she said softly. I thought I was running away, starting over with nothing. But really, I was running toward you, toward this life. I just did not know it yet. And I gave you a reason to stay, Vincent said, kissing her temple. But you gave me something too. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me everything, Delilah. They sat there as the afternoon sun slanted golden across the land, their children playing nearby, the ranch they had built spreading out around them. It had been 15 years since that day Vincent had ridden into the wagon train's camp. 20 years since Delilah had stood in independence with her mother's locket in her palm, trading it for an uncertain future. Now, looking at everything they had built together, Delilah understood that sometimes you had to let go of the past to reach for the future. Sometimes you had to trade away your last possession to find something infinitely more valuable. She had given up her mother's locket, but she had gained a life richer than she ever could have imagined. I love you, she said to Vincent, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them 15 years ago. I love you too, he replied, his voice warm and certain. Always and forever, Delilah. As the years continued to pass, their children grew into fine young people. Samuel inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's practical wisdom. He trained horses with a gentle hand and eventually started courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a kind girl named Emma who fit seamlessly into their family. Catherine grew into a spirited young woman who loved the ranch life as much as her brothers. She could ride as well as any cowboy, but she also had her mother's green thumb, expanding the garden into something truly spectacular. She talked about becoming a teacher someday, wanting to help educate the children in the growing community. Thomas, the baby, surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for business. Even as a youngster, he kept meticulous records of the ranch's expenses and income, and he had ideas about how to expand their operations that Vincent admitted were pretty clever. When Samuel was 21, he married Emma in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch. The whole community came to celebrate, and Delilah cried watching her oldest son pledge his life to the woman he loved. Vincent squeezed her hand, both of them remembering their own simple wedding at Fort Laramie all those years ago. Samuel and Emma built a house on the western edge of the ranch property, and within a year, they had given Vincent and Delilah their first grandchild, a baby girl they named Delilah after her grandmother. Holding that tiny infant, seeing her son become a father, Delilah felt the circle of life completing in the most beautiful way. Vincent aged handsomely, his dark hair silvering at the temples, his face weathering into distinguished lines. He was still strong and capable at 45, still running the ranch with the same dedication he always had, though now he had his sons working alongside him. Delilah at 40 was still beautiful in his eyes, though she laughed when he told her so, pointing out her gray hairs and the lines around her eyes. Those lines are from smiling, Vincent told her, tracing them gently with his finger. From 20 years of laughter and love. They are beautiful because they are proof of a life well lived. They sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains, a view they never tired of. The house had grown over the years, room by room, until it was a proper ranch house with multiple bedrooms, a large kitchen, a dining room that could seat the whole family, and a parlor with comfortable chairs and shelves full of books. "You have any regrets?" Delilah asked, a question she asked sometimes but already knew the answer to. "Not a single one," Vincent replied, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Every day with you has been a gift, Delilah, even the hard days because we faced them together. Even when the cattle got loose that time and trampled my entire garden," Delilah teased. "Even then," Vincent said solemnly, though his eyes sparkled with humor. "Though I will admit, you were somewhat terrifying when you came after me with that rake." They laughed together, the easy laughter of people who knew each other completely and loved each other anyway. 20 years of marriage had taught them each other's moods, each other's fears and hopes, each other's unspoken needs. They had grown together, building not just a ranch but a partnership that had survived every challenge thrown at it. Catherine brought them lemonade, smiling at finding her parents holding hands on the porch like always. At 17, she thought it was sweet how in love they still were after all these years. She hoped to find that kind of love someday, though she was in no hurry. She liked her life just as it was, helping her mother with the garden and the household, riding her horse across the ranch land, studying her books in the evening. "When is Samuel bringing little Delilah over?" Catherine asked. "I promised to watch her so he and Emma could go to the dance in town." "This evening," Delilah replied. "And Thomas is going to that dance too, so we will have the house to ourselves." "Mostly to ourselves," Vincent corrected, winking at his daughter. "Catherine will be here somewhere, probably reading and pretending not to listen to her parents being sappy." Catherine laughed. "I make no such promises, but I will try to give you some privacy." That evening, as promised, Samuel brought over baby Delilah, who reached immediately for her grandmother with chubby arms. Delilah took her with practiced ease, settling the toddler on her hip while Samuel gave instructions about bedtime and feeding. "We know how to take care of a baby, son," Vincent said, amused. "We managed to keep you alive, did we not?" Samuel had the grace to look sheepish. "I know, Pa. I just worry." "That is what being a parent does to you," Vincent said, clapping his son on the shoulder. "Now go on, take your wife dancing. We have got this." After Samuel and Emma left, and Catherine had retreated to her room with her book, Vincent and Delilah sat in the parlor with their granddaughter between them on a blanket, playing with wooden blocks Vincent had carved. The baby babbled happily, making towers and knocking them down, delighted with herself. "She has your eyes," Vincent observed, watching his granddaughter. "And Samuel's nose," Delilah replied. "And Emma's chin. She is a perfect mix. Just like our children were a perfect mix of us." Delilah leaned against Vincent's shoulder, feeling content in a way that went soul deep. This was what she had dreamed of back when dreams seemed impossible. A full life, a family, grandchildren, a home that rang with love and laughter. She had it all now, and it felt like grace. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Vincent asked, his arm coming around her automatically. "For seeing me that day, for buying my locket, for asking me to marry you, for building this life with me, for giving me a reason to stay when all I knew how to do was run." Vincent was quiet for a moment, then said, "And thank you for trading everything for passage west, for being brave enough to start over, for saying yes when I asked you to marry me, for building this life with me, for giving me a family when I thought I would always be alone." They sat there, holding each other, watching their granddaughter play, and Delilah thought about the long journey that had brought them here. From Independence to Fort Laramie, across the plains and deserts and mountains to California, from strangers to friends to lovers to partners. From two people with nothing to a family with everything that mattered. The locket still hung around her neck, containing her mother's portrait and Vincent's photograph, a reminder of where she had been and how far she had come. She touched it now, feeling its familiar weight, and smiled. Baby Delilah toddled over to her grandmother, demanding to be picked up. Delilah lifted her into her lap, and the child snuggled against her chest, getting sleepy. Vincent reached over to stroke the baby's dark hair, his hand so gentle, and Delilah fell in love with him all over again, as she did so often even after all these years. "Tell me the story," Catherine said, appearing in the doorway with her book. "About how you two met, please." Delilah looked at Vincent, who smiled and nodded. They had told this story before, many times, but their children never tired of hearing it. It was part of the family history now, part of who they were. "Well," Delilah began, settling back with her granddaughter in her arms. "It was the spring of 1876, and I had just traded my last possession for passage west. I thought I had nothing left, nothing at all. But I was wrong because I still had hope, even if I did not know it yet. And that hope led me to a broken wagon wheel, and a cowboy who knew how to fix more than just wood and metal. I saw her watching me work," Vincent continued, picking up the story, "and I thought she was the bravest person I had ever met. She had lost everything, but she was still standing, still moving forward. I knew right then that if I was lucky enough, if I was brave enough, maybe I could give her a reason to stop running, a reason to stay." Catherine had heard the story many times, but she still listened with rapt attention as her parents talked about the wagon train, the dance under the stars, the rough riders that came to camp, the confrontation at Fort Laramie. They talked about falling in love on the trail, about their wedding in the chapel, about finding this land and building their ranch from nothing. "And then Samuel was born," Delilah said, smiling at the sleeping baby in her arms. "And then you, Catherine. And then Thomas. And our family grew, and the ranch grew, and everything we dreamed about by that river at Fort Laramie came true." "Not everything," Vincent corrected gently. "It came out even better than we dreamed." Catherine smiled, satisfied with the story as always. "I want to find love like that someday," she said. "The kind that lasts and grows and gets better with time." "You will," Delilah assured her. "When the right person comes along, you will know, just like we knew." Later, after Catherine had gone to bed and baby Delilah had been put down in the nursery they still kept for visiting grandchildren, Vincent and Delilah stood on their porch, looking out at the ranch lit by moonlight. Everything was quiet and peaceful, the cattle settled, the horses dozing in the barn, the whole world seeming to hold its breath. "Happy?" Vincent asked, though he already knew the answer. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Delilah replied, leaning into his embrace. "You gave me the world, Vincent Garrett." "No," he said, kissing the top of her head. "We gave it to each other. Everything we have we built together." And standing there under the California stars, on the ranch they had carved from wilderness, surrounded by the family they had created, Delilah knew he was right. She had traded her last possession for passage west, thinking she was losing everything. But really, she had been investing in a future beyond her wildest dreams. The cowboy had given her a reason to stay, but she had given him one too. They had saved each other in all the ways that mattered, and then they had built something beautiful from that salvation. As the years continued to unfold, the ranch prospered and the family grew. Samuel and Emma had 2 more children, both boys. Catherine eventually did fall in love with a young lawyer who came to Redding to set up practice. She married him in her mid-20s, and they built a house in town, though she visited the ranch often, unable to stay away from the land she loved. Thomas, practical and ambitious, expanded the ranch's operations, buying adjacent land and increasing their herds until the Garrett Ranch was one of the largest and most successful in Shasta County. Vincent and Delilah aged gracefully into their roles as grandparents and eventually great-grandparents. They never stopped holding hands. They never stopped watching sunsets together from their porch. They never stopped telling their children and grandchildren the story of how they met on a wagon train heading west, how they fell in love under the endless sky, how they built everything from nothing but determination and love. When Vincent was 70 and Delilah was 65, they celebrated their golden wedding anniversary with a huge party that drew friends and family from all over California. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch, and everyone toasted the couple who had shown them all what true love looked like. 50 years, Vincent said in his speech, his voice still strong despite his age, his arm around Delilah's waist. 50 years since I married the love of my life in a little chapel at Fort Laramie. And I would do it all again, every single day, every single challenge, because it led me here, to this moment with all of you. Delilah wiped away tears as she looked at the crowd of people who existed because she and Vincent had found each other. Their children, grown and successful. Their grandchildren, starting families of their own. Their great-grandchildren, the newest generation. All of them here because two people had been brave enough to believe in love and foolish enough to think they could build something lasting in the wilderness. When I traded my mother's locket for passage west, Delilah said, finding her voice, I thought I was losing the last piece of my past. But really, I was buying my future, and what a future it has been. Thank you all for being part of it, and thank you, Vincent, for building it with me. They kissed, to the applause and cheers of their family, and Delilah felt her heart swell with gratitude. Every hard day had been worth it. Every challenge, every struggle, every moment of doubt or fear had led to this. A full life, a legacy of love, a family that would continue long after she and Vincent were gone. The party lasted late into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. The younger children fell asleep in various corners, while the adults talked and laughed. Vincent and Delilah danced together under the stars, just as they had done 50 years ago when they were young and everything was still ahead of them. I love you, Vincent said, holding her close as they swayed to the music. After 50 years, I love you more than ever. I love you too, Delilah replied, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Thank you for giving me a reason to stay, all those years ago. Thank you for being my home. Years later, when they were both in their 80s, Vincent and Delilah still lived on the ranch, though Samuel and his family had taken over most of the operations. They spent their days peacefully, tending Delilah's garden, sitting on the porch, visiting with the endless stream of family members who came by. They moved slower now, Vincent's joints stiff with arthritis, Delilah's hands gnarled from decades of hard work. But they were content, having lived full and rich lives. One spring morning, 70 years after Delilah had traded her locket for passage west, she and Vincent sat on their porch watching the sun rise over the mountains. They held hands as they always did, and the locket still hung around Delilah's neck, a little more worn but still treasured. It has been a good life, Vincent said quietly. The best life, Delilah agreed. I would not change a single thing. Not even the part where my cattle trampled your garden, he teased, his eyes twinkling. Delilah laughed, the sound a little wheezy but still full of joy. Not even that, though I reserve the right to remind you of it whenever convenient. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ranch wake up around them. Their grandson was in the barn feeding horses. Their great-granddaughter was gathering eggs from the chicken coop. The land was full of life, full of family, full of the legacy they had built together. "I am ready whenever you are," Delilah said softly, knowing without having to explain what she meant. They had talked about it before, about growing old, about what came after. Neither of them feared it, not after the lives they had lived. "Not yet," Vincent said, squeezing her hand. "We have got more sunrises to watch together." And they did. They had many more mornings on that porch, many more sunsets, many more visits from family, many more moments of quiet joy. They had time to say everything that needed saying, to make peace with their lives, to feel complete. When Vincent finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, with Delilah holding his hand, she grieved, but she did not break. He had given her 60 years of love, and that love sustained her. She kept the ranch in the family, made sure everything was in order, and continued to tend her garden and sit on the porch, though now there was an empty chair beside her. But not for long. Just 6 months later, Delilah followed Vincent, passing away quietly in her sleep with her children and grandchildren gathered around her. She was 82, and she died with her mother's locket still around her neck, containing the portraits of the two people who had loved her most, her mother and her husband. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under oak trees Vincent had planted decades ago. Their headstones were simple but said everything important, their names, their dates, and beneath that, a single line. They gave each other a reason to stay. The ranch continued to thrive under the care of their descendants. The house they built still stood, added onto and modernized, but still fundamentally the same. The garden Delilah planted still bloomed every spring. The land they had claimed with nothing but hope and hard work still supported generations of Garretts. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, family members sitting on that porch swore they could feel Vincent and Delilah there, still holding hands, still watching the sunset, still together in the place they had built from love and determination. Their story became legend in the family, passed down through generations. How she traded her last possession for passage west, how the cowboy gave her a reason to stay, and how together they built something that would last forever. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, full of adventure and hardship and triumph. But more than that, it was a story about hope, about two people who refused to give up, who found each other when they both needed saving, and who built a legacy of love that would echo through generations. In the end, that locket that Delilah had traded away and Vincent had bought back became a family heirloom, passed down to each generation with the story of what it represented. Sacrifice and hope, loss and redemption, the ending of one life and the beginning of another. It was a reminder that sometimes you had to let go of the past to embrace the future, and that sometimes the things you thought you lost forever came back to you in unexpected ways. The Garrett Ranch still stands to this day in Shasta County, California, near the town of Redding, a testament to what two people with nothing but love and determination can build. And if you visit on a quiet evening and sit on that old porch, you might just feel the presence of Vincent and Delilah Garrett, still there, still together, still proving that true love can overcome anything, even time itself. Their story was complete, full of all the moments that make a life: love and loss, struggle and triumph, sorrow and joy. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for: a life well lived, a love that lasted, and the knowledge that what they built together would continue long after they were gone. The cowboy had given her a reason to stay, but together they had given each other so much more: a home, a family, a future, and a love story that would be told for generations to come. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, Vincent and Delilah Garrett were together still, holding hands and watching sunsets over the ranch they built, forever and always.